I was 3 weeks into a logging contract up near Hearst when my daughter called me crying so hard I couldn't make out a single word. That was unusual. My daughter isn't a crier. She's 22, works at a coffee roastery in Sudbury, fixes her own leaky faucets, and changes her own winter tires. She calls me on Sundays and we talk about hockey and the price of groceries, and she always sounds fine. So when I heard that sound through the phone, that broken, gasping kind of crying that means something is actually wrong, I pulled my truck off the logging road and sat in the cab with the engine idling and my heart doing something strange in my chest. "Dad," she finally said, "it's Declan." Declan is her husband. They got married 2 summers ago at a small outdoor ceremony near Killarney Provincial Park. 40 people, a rented tent, her mom's potato salad. I walked her down the aisle on a path of pine needles and I cried more than she did. I liked Declan. He was quiet and careful, the kind of man who shakes your hand and looks you in the eye and means it. He worked in surveying, drove long distances for work sometimes, and my daughter had told me more than once that she trusted him completely. "What about Declan?" I said. She took a breath that sounded like it hurt. "He's been taking money from our joint account," she said, "for 6 months. I only found out because I went to renew our insurance and the account was, Dad, it's almost empty. It was supposed to be for the house. The down payment." I didn't say anything. I was looking out the windshield at a stand of black spruce and trying to organize what she was telling me. "How much?" I said. She told me. It was enough that I gripped the steering wheel. "Does he know that you know?" I asked. "No," she said. "I just found out this morning. He's at work. He doesn't come home until 6. I looked at the clock on the dash. It was just after noon. "Don't say anything to him yet," I said. "I'm coming. I want to be honest about something. When you spend weeks at a time away from home for work, you build a certain kind of distance. Not emotional distance. I love my daughter more than anything, but a practical distance. You learn not to panic. You learn to be calm because panic doesn't help when you're 2 hours from the nearest town and something goes sideways with the equipment. You get good at assessing problems from far away and deciding what to do. I assessed this on the 5-hour drive south. I went through it methodically. The money was gone. The account was drained. Declan had done it secretly over months. That meant it wasn't an emergency he'd been ashamed to tell her about. It meant it was deliberate, and deliberate meant there was something or someone he was hiding. I'd been driving logging roads and highway stretches since I was 19. I put on an oldies station out of North Bay and I drove and I thought, and by the time I pulled into the parking lot of the Tim Hortons 2 blocks from their apartment, I had a list of questions I needed answered before I said a word to him. My daughter met me there. She looked terrible, pale and hollow-eyed, still in her work clothes from the morning. She'd called in sick and spent the day pulling up bank statements on her laptop and building a spreadsheet. She slid it across the table to me. I looked at it for a long time. The withdrawals were always cash, never more than $900, which I knew meant he was deliberately staying under the threshold that triggers a bank report. He knew that. He'd done it intentionally. The first one was in October. They'd been saving for 3 years before that. 3 years of her working doubles at the roastery and him putting in overtime on survey contracts. All of it going into one account they'd both agreed not to touch until they had enough for a down payment in this market. He'd taken it in 8 months, $52,000 and change. "Have you talked to the bank?" I asked. "I called them," she said. "They said since it's a joint account he has equal right to withdraw. There's nothing they can do." "Did he forge anything? Signatures, authorization?" "No. His name is on the account. He just took it." I folded the spreadsheet and put it in my jacket pocket. "Okay," I said. She looked at me. "Okay? Dad? That's our house. That was supposed to be our house." "I know," I said. "I'm not saying it's okay. I'm saying we're going to figure out where it went." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that stopped me cold. "I found something else," she said, "in his jacket. When I was looking for the bank statements, I went through his things." She reached into her bag and put a piece of paper on the table. It was a folded receipt from a pharmacy in Timmins. Not their pharmacy, not their city. Timmins was 3 hours north. The receipt was for a pregnancy test. She looked at the receipt and then she looked at me and she didn't say anything because she didn't have to. I'm not a man who loses his temper easily. I've worked with difficult people my entire career. Logging camps have a way of sorting people quickly. You find out fast who can be trusted and who can't, who will show up when it's -30 and the skidder's stuck, and who will have an excuse. I learned a long time ago that anger is expensive. It costs you clarity when you need it most. But sitting in that Tim Hortons with my daughter, watching her stare at a pharmacy receipt from a city 3 hours away, I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger exactly. More like the moment right before a tree falls. That split second of silence when it's already past the point of no return. I asked her what she wanted to do. She said she didn't know. She said she kept waiting to feel something definitive, rage or grief or certainty, and instead she just felt numb and very tired. I asked her if she wanted me there when he got home. She thought about it. Then she said yes. He came in at 6:15. The apartment was a small 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building near the university. They'd been renting it for 4 years, and she knew every creak in the hallway, could hear the elevator from the kitchen. She texted me when she heard it, and I came up from the lobby where I'd been sitting with a coffee. I want to be clear. I didn't come up to threaten him or frighten him. I came up because she asked me to, and because after what I'd seen in that spreadsheet, I didn't think she should be alone in a room with someone who'd been lying to her for 8 months. He unlocked the door and walked in and saw her at the kitchen table. He said hey and started taking off his boots, and then he looked up and saw me. He froze, just for a second, but I saw it. I've watched a lot of men realize something has gone wrong, and that fraction of a second freeze tells you everything. It tells you they know exactly what they're walking into. Hey Ray, he said. His voice was careful, neutral. Sit down, Declan, my daughter said. He sat down across from her at the kitchen table. I stayed standing near the door. I didn't say a word. She put the bank statements on the table. He looked at them for a long time without speaking. Where did it go? She asked. I was proud of her for that. He was quiet for another moment, and then he said, I was going to tell you. Where did it go? He put his hands flat on the table. He had the look of a man who had rehearsed a version of this conversation and was now realizing none of the rehearsed versions were going to work. There's a situation with someone I was seeing before you, and I got serious. Before we were serious. My daughter didn't move. There was a child, a little girl. She's 4 now. She's been living with her mother in Timmins, and I was sending money. For her, for the little girl. The kitchen was very quiet. You have a daughter, my daughter said. Yes, and you've been lying to me about this for 4 years. He didn't answer. And you took money from our account, money that was supposed to be our house, to send to her. I didn't know how to tell you. I watched my daughter's face go through several things in about 4 seconds. I can't fully describe it. It was like watching someone realize the house they've been living in was built on something wrong. Then she said very quietly, get out. He left that night. Took a bag and left. I stayed with her. The next few days were some of the hardest I've been through with her since her mother and I divorced when she was 9. She didn't cry much. She ate very little. She sat at the kitchen table for long stretches of time looking at nothing, and I made soup and tea and didn't try to fill the silence with things that would be useless to say. On the 3rd day, she asked me to help her find a lawyer. I'd already looked some up. There was a family law clinic through Legal Aid Ontario that did free consultations, and a woman named, well, I'll call her the lawyer. She was professional and direct and didn't waste time. We went together. The lawyer explained that since the money had been taken from a joint account by a joint account holder, the withdrawals themselves weren't criminal. But the circumstances, the concealment, the fraud by omission, the fact that the funds were accumulated during the marriage for a specific joint purpose, gave her grounds to pursue the matter in family court. The lawyer used words like unjust enrichment and breach of fiduciary duty. I wrote them down. She also said this, you need to know there's a child involved. Whatever happens between you and your husband, that child didn't choose any of this. My daughter nodded. She already knew that. She'd said it herself on the 2nd night sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of tea. I'm not angry at the little girl. Just that. Clear and simple. I think that's when I understood that my daughter was going to be okay. Not right away, not easily, but eventually. Here is what the investigation, because that's what it became, turned up in the following weeks. Declan had been sending money to the child's mother in Timmins since the little girl was born. At first it was manageable amounts, things he could cover from his own paychecks. Then the child's mother had lost her job. Then there were medical bills. The little girl had some ear issues that required surgery when she was 3. Declan had panicked. He'd started taking from the joint account. $900 here, $900 there. He'd told himself he would replace it before my daughter noticed. He never did. His surveying contract had also dried up that winter. He'd been telling my daughter he was working when he wasn't. He'd been driving to Timmins not for work but to see his daughter. I'm going to say something that is uncomfortable to admit. When I put all of this together, I understood some of it, not the lying, not the theft. But a man who found out he had a child and didn't know what to do, who loved his daughter enough to drive 3 hours in February to see her, who was so ashamed of the lie he'd told that he kept making it worse to avoid telling the truth. I've made mistakes in my life, not like this. But I understand the particular cowardice of the man who keeps digging because he can't figure out how to stop. That doesn't make it right. I want to be very clear about that. What he did was wrong. He stole from my daughter. He lied to her face for years. He took money that she earned pulling doubles at a coffee roastery, and he moved it somewhere she couldn't see for reasons she didn't know about, and he let her plan a future on a foundation he'd already hollowed out. That is a wrong thing. The legal process took 8 months. Family court in Ontario moves slowly. My daughter had a good lawyer by the end of it, not the legal aid clinic, who did their best, but a private lawyer she found through a recommendation, a woman who specialized in matrimonial property disputes and had seen cases like this before. The court found in my daughter's favor on the matrimonial property claim. The judge used language I won't try to reproduce exactly, but the gist was that the funds accumulated in a joint account during a marriage for a declared joint purpose could not be unilaterally redirected without the knowledge and consent of both parties. Declan was ordered to repay the full amount over a structured period. Given his income situation, this was going to take years. The marriage ended. They divorced. It was finalized in late spring, just before the anniversary of the wedding in Killarney. She told me she'd driven past the park once on the way to somewhere else and hadn't even been tempted to stop. I took that as a sign she was further along than she let on. I want to tell you something about the little girl in Timmins, because she's part of this story whether I want her to be or not. My daughter, in a move that I did not expect and still think about often, reached out to the child's mother. Not to cause problems, not out of anger. She did it because she said, that little girl deserves to know her father, and I'm not going to be the reason she doesn't. The child's mother was, by my daughter's account, exhausted and frightened and had not fully understood the extent of what Declan had done. She'd accepted the money. She hadn't asked where it came from. I don't know how to judge that. It's not my place to. But they talked. 2 women who had been lied to by the same man in different ways, figuring out how to proceed in a world where that man was still in both their lives. Declan, for his part, eventually entered a repayment agreement and began formal shared custody arrangements for his daughter. He moved to a smaller apartment. He got a different job with a geotechnical company in New Liskeard, by all accounts, and my information is secondhand. Through my daughter, he's doing the work of actually being present for the little girl. My daughter said she thinks about her sometimes, the little girl. She doesn't know her, has never met her, doesn't intend to. But she said, she has dark hair. I saw a photo once. She looks like she has a good laugh. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. Sometimes the right move is to stay quiet and let a thing be what it is. Here's what I should have done differently. When my daughter got engaged to Declan, I did what most fathers do. I took him out for a beer. I asked him the standard questions, his plans, his work, his intentions. He answered well. He shook my hand. I decided I liked him. What I should have done is what I do when I'm evaluating a subcontractor for a logging job. I should have asked harder questions. I should have asked him to show me his finances the way I'd asked to see insurance and equipment records. That's not cynicism. That's due diligence. I didn't because it felt invasive. I didn't because I trusted my daughter's judgment, and I still do. She married someone she believed was honest, and that belief was reasonable given what she knew. The failure was his, not hers. But if I had one thing to say to any parent whose child is about to marry someone, one piece of advice I'd give standing here with all of this behind me. It's this: before you combine your finances with someone, know what their finances actually look like. Know what their obligations are. Know what they owe, and to whom. Love is not a substitute for transparency. Love can coexist with transparency. In fact, love that resists transparency is usually protecting something. I wish someone had told me that 35 years ago. It's been almost 2 years now since that phone call on the logging road. My daughter moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood she likes, near a decent grocery store and a park where she runs in the mornings. She got a raise at the roastery and she's been saving again, slowly, carefully, in an account with her name only on it. She's not in a hurry. She talks about buying a place eventually, maybe a small house somewhere, maybe a condo. She's not sure yet. She sounds different on the phone now. Not harder exactly. More like someone who knows the ground under her feet and checks it before she puts her weight on it. I think that's not the worst thing a person can learn. I finished the Hearst contract and came back south for the winter. I drove past Killarney once on my way through. I didn't stop either. Last Sunday she called and we talked about hockey and the price of groceries. Then she said, out of nowhere, "Dad, I'm glad you came." I said, "I'll always come." She said, "I know." That's the part I never had to doubt. That's the thing about being a father. You can't always be there. The work takes you away, the distance is real, and you make your peace with that because you have to. But when the call comes, the real call, the one that sounds like something is actually wrong, you don't calculate. You don't weigh it against the contract or the weather or the hours left in the drive. You pull off the road and you listen and then you go. That's the only part I got right. I'll take it.